Adam and I first met in '96, and we started to write together, and for years we talked about doing a project together. And Adam, you and James, you guys have known each other since like '94.
Yeah, I mean actually James, when he was in the Pumpkins, invited Fountains of Wayne on tour. That was like our first major tour that we ever did, and ever since then we've been friends and done a lot of projects together, produced stuff together, have a little indie label together.
They were the worst band to take on tour.
Yeah, we were young.
Troublemakers. Adam and I have a studio together, so he had the idea, and I was like, oh, that's great. Yeah, we should do it. That was it.
Pretty straightforward.
We see each other every day around the water cooler, So we had this idea of doing something where Taylor was singing over some loud guitars, which is, Taylor's the greatest singer around, and we thought that would be cool to hear his voice over some loud guitars, which isn't necessarily what people are used to when they hear his voice. And we started talking about power pop stuff that we all liked, and then we started saying, well, who would be a cool drummer to round out this idea of ours? And the greatest power pop drummer ever is this guy behind me here. So we approached him.
At home, I've been doing a lot of side stuff on downtime in the winter and stuff. It's usually alt country or young bands. I got the phone call from this, and the office was just, you into this? And I was like, well, it's all about, I got to hear some music. I don't want to get up there and do something I don't like to do. And so the songs were with. I got a disc of the songs, and it was a no-brainer. It was really a no-brainer I just said, yeah, let's book it. I've got time before the last summer we toured with Heart and Journey from coast to coast and back again. I just said, I've got 3 weeks here. Let's get out here and get this tracks cut.
He thankfully was into it and came in and cut a record with us. Bunny's got such an identifiable style of drumming, and literally we started by having some conversations. Before we even thought of calling him himself, we were saying, who do we know that can play like Bunny Carlos? Because it's such a thing, like the kind of fills that he does and how hard he hits, and just, it's such a signature kind of drum playing. And a lot of people that I know that play drums, are really great, but they came up in more of like a modern rock era where it's just a different feel, different style. We wanted it to have that balance.
One of the things that's really interesting about Cinema's project is we were thinking about sort of multiple variations on what you think of with power pop, and everything over to sort of even Elvis Costello, which is sort of like, more that era, but not necessarily, the wall of guitars, to the Buzzcocks, which gets kind of punk rock. And the thing that's unique about this is it's still driven by these great songs. The songs become really sort of the centerpiece of the whole thing. So I think we were pulling from lots of different inspirations. I mean, records like, the Raspberries, it's a great example of just a mix of great guitar riffs and simple melodies over that.
The time-consuming part of making the record was just getting the schedules coordinated. The actual record took like no time. I mean, the idea started like 3 years ago, but the total time in the studio was probably 3 weeks or something. It was really fast, maybe a month, I don't know. Bunny came in, cut everything in 2 days or something like that, 3 days. And Taylor pretty much sang everything in a couple sessions, and that was it. I mean, and part of that I think is just because we intentionally tried to make a really simple record. I mean, we said, let's just make it 2 guitars, bass, and drums, and some harmony vocals, and that's it. Let's not get lost in the world of overdubs and electronics and keyboards and whatever else. I mean, basically three of us wrote, and we wanted it to have that band vibe of like 3 writers, and mostly they weren't collaborative. Mostly we just talked about it, everybody bringing some songs, everybody writing some songs, and Taylor and I co-wrote one together, which was actually the first one. When we first started talking about the project, we wrote this one out of his place in Tulsa, and but the rest we just kind of each brought in some stuff. But I liked also that idea that the record would have some different writers on it, some different takes on what each thought the idea was. Like James has one song on the record that's called Cha Cha, which is almost got a little bit of like a T-Rex kind of thing, but then the chorus gets much more sort of Beatlesy, Raspberry-y or something. It's an interesting hybrid.
It wasn't as much, we didn't decide to collaborate on the songs. It was more just, it was a sort of fast, hey, you got a song, and throw it together, and before we knew it, there was a list of songs that were like, hey, this is a record. And I think it was more just not overthinking it. And like Adam was saying, it was kind of this crazy thing of the fact that everybody has bands, everybody has, things they're doing, and so we were trying to just not make this too much of a pressure situation. And by the time we had 9, 10, 11 songs, it was like, okay, got it.
I mean, the guys at Fountains of Wayne are used to be doing all kinds of cockamamie things outside of the band. So at this point, they just kind of roll their eyes like, okay, whatever, I mean, they know that I'm still devoted to being in that band, and there's no threat to it because I've been doing lots of stuff for years, so I think it's all good.
We all met Adam when we were making our first record, and Fountains had just released their first record. And so we had kind of a interplay of thinking there might be some collaboration down the line. And it's also interesting for me too because it's a chance to sing differently. I mean, the stuff I first listened to that first got us into music was sort of soul and kind of more rootsy stuff. And then over the last decade of loving music, discovering more of the power pop stuff. So it was a great chance to just do something that is totally not necessarily something we do in Hampstead. The other guys were totally into it.
Cheap Trick, everybody had done side projects in the past. I mean, Rick is on Gene Simmons records and Hall & Oates records, and all sorts of people call Rick for a song or for a guitar part. And Robin did a solo album on Interscope back in the 90s. Tom took a 6-year vacation from Cheap Trick to do his solo career, and he does a lot of sessions living in Nashville. And so it wasn't unusual that I got a call to go do something. The unusual thing was how much it is like Cheap Trick. We've got a great singer, we got a great guitar player, we got a great bass player, there's 3 songwriters, just like Cheap Trick. One guy writes most, the other guys contribute stuff to it. All 3 guys in Tinted Windows have written songs I think are easily singles from the album. And Cheap Trick is like that too. So I wasn't going into a completely different situation here when I got in with the band. The different part is we're going out and doing some gigs and taking it on the road a little bit.
We kind of didn't tell people until we could play stuff for people.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't so much intensely trying to be secretive. It was more just like until you've done it, there's nothing to really talk about. And so, apart from our close friends and families and stuff, we weren't advertising it was happening because we weren't totally sure we were ever going to pull it off. I mean, it was like we started working on it, and then like a year went by, and we couldn't get together, and we were like, well, that was a good idea, but it never happened. And we just wanted to wait until it was in the can, and we were like, no, we really did make a record, I swear.
But of course, I mean, the minute anybody heard about it, I mean, I remember I mentioned it to somebody that was working with our management company, that it existed, and the immediate kind of the ears perk up, and people go, wow, what is that? That sounds really cool. And we were, of course, hoping that aspect is a positive for the band, at least to get people in the door. Be like, what is this?
Honestly, to me, part of being a musician these days is, everything used to be so much about like the old way of doing things, and I think now it's just about doing stuff that you're interested in doing and doing stuff that you're having fun with, and like if you want to work with other musicians and do a project, like go do it, and you don't have to just be like, here's your band, album, tour, write, album. This whole thing just came about just because it sounded like fun. That was it. The whole thought process behind it.
We knew we had a window of time to make it happen and to get people excited, and so you need to have people that really understand why what we're doing is maybe is cool, and what about it, how to approach it, and what people are going to react to, and so it didn't make sense to just go out to everybody in the universe and be like, hey, major labels, do you want to put this out? We need to find somebody that really dug it. So it's been kind of fun. It's been like a puzzle of people trying to throw in different things, different aspects, trying to build a band from scratch, and it's funny too because we were talking about the fact that we've all spent years playing songs that the people in the audience know. They walk in and you have certain fans that are singing your songs. It's kind of impossible to actually go back to playing a first show, which has been kind of a cool thing. It's like, you get to start from scratch and feel what it feels like to walk out and be like, they've never heard this stuff before,